Good evening and welcome. I'm Anne McLean from the library's music division. It's really a pleasure for me tonight to be talking with three artists that I've been hoping to bring to the library for a very long time, coming together in a very rare chamber collaboration. Please join me in welcoming clarinetist Martin Frost, violist Anton Tomastit, and pianist Shai Wasner. I was just telling them that we'll be sitting in the room where we have our Strads over here and in the cases. And a moment ago, Antoine was talking with our curator, Carolyn Ward-Bamford, about the Stradivari violas. So it's a beautiful evening, cherry blossom time, and it's going to be a beautiful concert. We'll have the chance to experience this music through your ears in your imaginative arrangements, not only in these pieces by Brahms and Dvorak, but in your brilliant and joyous dance mosaic, a truly show-stopping finale that you guys will really love. So you are all sought after by the world's great orchestras, and I know you all also devote serious time to chamber music. So I imagine that you've performed in various contexts together before, but I wondered, is this your first tour as a trio?
No, actually not. We did a slightly different program 2 years ago in Europe. I think the same amount of, I think it was 6 concerts. Can't remember the halls, but Hamburg.
But also we should say, we were supposed to do a very big tour, both of the US and Europe, back in February 2021. And it could not happen. But I should say this here, I should thank the Library of Congress, because the library, you have to imagine our concerts were getting cancelled last minute. 1 week before, Shai told me, I don't know, maybe it's happening still. And we didn't know if we were going to the States. And the Library of Congress was the only one who stayed until the end and said, if you come, we will do a concert and we will film it. And if you cannot come but can meet in Europe, you can also film a concert, and we will give that to our subscribers. So finally we are here, and we're very happy to be here. But we played in Europe in October 22, I think, already as a trio, and in New York, this you remember better. When was this?
I think it was 2014.
2014.
Like just once.
Just once. One piece.
So we're so lucky. We really are.
And this is a completely different program, actually. So this program is very new. So it's,
And you share a love of transcriptions, all of you. And I saw, Shai, your comment about Dvorak's Legends, the first piece that you'll hear on the program. I decided to enjoy this music by reworking it into a combination of instruments that I particularly like, clarinet, viola, and piano. And so it's great to hear everyone in this program that you've created yourselves. All of you.
Well, with some help from Dvorak and Brahms and
Exactly.
a few other people. Yeah, but it's quite a rare combination. There isn't much repertoire for this particular combination, and therefore, we felt it would be fun to transcribe some of other pieces that some of them you'll recognize, and others are probably less familiar. The Dvorak is probably not that famous, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful piece. And there's something very warm and kind of welcoming in the combination of clarinet, viola, and piano. And so there should be more repertoire for it.
And the Legends, did you play this as a four-hand work?
Yes, I've done them a couple times in the four-hand version. There is an orchestra version by Dvorak himself, but I believe the original was for piano four hands.
And so in this program, we're going to be very interested to see how you put together this deeply romantic program with all these gorgeous colors, and the highlighting the textures and tessituras of the instruments, and it gives us the opportunity to hear them through your ears and your imagination. And thinking about Brahms and Dvorak, Brahms was really a champion of Dvorak, wasn't he? He really helped to make this piece come about, I think, through the publisher helping. Do you know about that aspect of it?
Yeah, I think he quite admired Dvorak's talent. I mean, so, you know, there's some people say that he was even jealous at how kind of like easily Dvorak was working. You know, like the melodies would just come to him just like this. Of course, Brahms has nothing to apologize for himself, but quite different type of composer. Each of them, they're quite different. Brahms, I think, is a little bit more focused on specific genres, and Dvorak, was active in probably more genres than Brahms. He wrote operas as well, and tone poems, and so different characters, but clearly, Brahms knew talent when he saw it, and that was the case with Dvorak. And so also with the cello concerto, of course, he admired the cello concerto very much, and famously said that if he knew that the cello could be written for like that, then maybe he would have written a cello concerto. Who knows? But we'll never know.
People talk about a sense of narrative in the legends, and yet I don't think there's a program, but it's interesting. He dedicated this to Hanslick, the critic, who said, of course, no one knows what tale is being told, but you feel that wonders and fairy tales might play a leading role, something like that. But how do you envision the piece? And you chose 3 pieces of the whole set, right, to transcribe?
Yeah, the full set, it has 10, so it's very big. I felt that for the purpose of genuine music, it would be kind of like a nice thing to have a set of 3. I did a couple more later on, but I think these particular 3, the first 3, really work together as a kind of like almost like a set on their own. Yes, I mean the stories. Who knows if he even thought of specific stories? But I think you'll see that something in the music is very spontaneous, like really like storytelling, and there are many different tempos, and you really feel like somebody's narrating his story very enthusiastically, and so in a way it's almost more fun not to know what the story is, but rather kind of like make it up for yourself based on what the music does. It's better than if you knew that it was a particular story, and then,
I was going to ask you about transcribing, since you and Martin both have done this a lot. And have you also done some transcriptions as well?
I didn't
Yeah.
transcribe so much, or did I?
So the
my
transcriptions
brothers
are
did.
from his brother.
Yeah, from my brothers. It's
Your brothers,
worth to
yeah.
mention that my brothers, I have a big brother and I have a little brother, and the little brother is a viola player, and the big brother is a pianist.
Yeah.
And they did, for this program, my little brother did the Bartók Romanian dances, which is also, I don't know if it's storytelling, but it's he bring back the Romanian dances more to the origin, so Romanian folk music in these arrangements. And it's also the dance mosaic. I done a dance mosaic, a program called Dance Mosaic for orchestra and clarinet. So I always thought about these, how familiar folk, where all these composition, where composers took folk music and draw it into their own world. And that's a good example on this, especially when Shai, in the end, take this Bach jig from the French suite number 5, I think, and he discovered that it's very, very close to a Bulgarian folk song, which is in 14/16 plus 11/16 rhythm. So it's very complicated, but it sounds very, very close to it, which you will hear tonight. And it's it's interesting to see how the relation between totally different style could be surprising but natural.
Yeah.
I feel that there is, the more we play this wonderful program, that both of them actually build, and I saw it in our WhatsApp group being built little by little, and they were exchanging, and I was staying distant because I could see their geniuses really speak. But the more we play it, the more I feel a link between telling stories, fairy tales, and the way we transmit folk music, like the transmission of music, but through talking words or feelings or gestures, but not necessarily with a conservatory education. Then also the link with improvisation, which is a feeling of the music in the moment. And you will see in the program tonight there is a very wonderful little moment dedicated to Shai's talent with improvisation. You will hear in the second half so much incredible virtuosic and colorful improvisation from Martin, who will probably make you discover that the clarinet can do things no one ever knew before. But all these things that go a little bit past the instruments, that I find very interesting about this program. And it really feels like a conversation between ourselves. Maybe it's like our WhatsApp group being put on stage, and all the ideas of his brothers and of Shai, all this is coming together and making it a very different rhetorical folk program. And I really enjoy being a part of this. I'm kind of mesmerized, but I have to play some notes also. But but I'm kind of mesmerized at all this.
But you know, it comes across even in the rehearsal so much, exactly what you're talking about. You're in for a very special concert, I think. What were we going to say?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I agree. I just said we are all mesmerized, but it's also the joy of playing together. It's like friend to friend. The trio is really if you start like we did with Mozart, Kegelstadt, that's absolutely a piece from friend to friend. Yes. And then you enjoy
Same
it.
situation also.
Yeah, exactly.
Just friends together.
Yeah. So of course it's and when you create this kind of program, as Antoine said, when you use, we spoke about it in the car today, that so many composers, not only Shai but other composers like Mendelssohn, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven were also famous for their improvisation. Of course, they were, So it's a combination that I enjoy a lot to listen to, basically, also very much.
I was thinking about the issues of just how you rehearse and so forth together and how you create the transcriptions and so forth. What's the starting point when you're looking at beginning to write one? Do you hear something in your mind that's a little different? Do you have a sound color? How do you approach it? And then once you have it, how do you talk about it together?
Well, I think the nearest sort of concept for a music, transcription of one piece of music to another ensemble, it's a little bit like translating a novel. So, you take a novel that is there, and the ideas are there, and the story is there, but when you translate it into another language, it needs to work in that language. In other words, it's not Google Translate where it's just word for word, being translated, but it needs to be alive, and it needs to kind of like make sense for a reader. And so I would say it's very much like that, except the language being, let's say, from piano four hands, in the case of the Dvorak, since you mentioned that, into a piano trio, or trio of clarinet, viola, piano. So it needs to function as a trio. It needs to function as a chamber piece, even more than the piano four hands.
On its own.
Yeah, and because when it's piano four hands, often the two parts really are supposed to fuse into one sort of entity. Even more than two pianos, where it's really constantly back and forth. But four hands is really kind of like magnified piano, if you will. But a trio can never really be one thing. It's always a conversation. It's always three characters. And so you need to somehow make that, hopefully, work using the same music. I mean, you don't really change the music. You can add certain things that, you know, that are inside, certain textures. So it's not note for note. You don't take the exact same notes and just decide, okay, this one the viola will play and this one with the clarinet will play. But it needs to be, each part, the viola part needs to somehow work on viola and make the viola sound good, and clarinet and piano. And at the same time have some sort of a constant conversation. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about chamber music that we shouldn't forget, especially nowadays with everything that's going on.
What you could contribute as an instrumentalist, maybe not so much in your arrangement, but it's good to have all the instrumentalists on stage in the rehearsal process, and also before. What I contribute maybe is like trying out new sound or sound landscape to present for an arranger, and said maybe these could fit for the viola, or Antoine comes, all these flageolet works together with the clarinets doing this, and then suddenly we have a new voice that could be a new character. Also that could be something that the energy go back and forward, which I think is beautiful. I don't know if you agree, Shai, but
Yes, of course.
yeah, maybe you don't need it because you are so quick in your head and you can think of all the things. But sometimes it could be, wow, this is new, this is
partnership.
fresh. Yes, partnership, you know. And of course, collaboration is everything. I think it doesn't matter if you're a conductor, if you play chamber music, collaboration is everything. So
Yes, you can always make changes later on. But I think that, like I was saying, the fundamental principle of chamber music is the conversation. And that's really the most beautiful thing about chamber music in specific, because the greatest works that were written for, whether it's piano trio or quartet or string quartet or clarinet quintet, that element is always there. In the greatest of those works, it's never, you know, all instruments accompanying one of them, or, you know, there's always a dynamic of dialogue, and I think that's really something that's very inspiring.
I always thought that, I mean, the greatest form of storytelling in music is opera, but in opera, which I really love as a, sorry to say such a simple word, but as a show, I love going to the opera and live and seeing and hearing and the combination of everything. But what I love more than anything is when there are trios or quartets in an opera, in a Mozart opera, for example, where he brings these people talking together. And I remember the first time I heard it was actually the Magic Flute at the Met, and I was a student at Yale University, and I saw that passage, and my teacher had told me about these kind of trios or quartets that happen in opera. And maybe it's because I come from a family where everybody speaks together all the time, and you have 3 conversations going on. But it's so interesting, and everybody has their sensitivity and emotions, and you try to speak and on top of each other, but then also mixing sometimes together, and suddenly you are in thirds or in 6, and it's so beautiful, and there is a suspended moment. And I always knew, for example, that I'm a perfect born viola player, because I love to be that middle person in the trio, and I love to watch their conversation and then come in with maybe a stupid comment, but that leads somewhere else, or with a joke, or but I very much enjoy the conversational part of the chamber music. And when you play with very talented artists, of course, but friends, it happens, this moment on stage, I can't describe it in other words, that I really feel that I can hear them speak while we play. And not just with the notes, mostly 90% with that, but 10% I can almost hear them say, you know, what if we did this? And what if, but do you want to join me in this dynamic? And there is something in the eyes, in the breathing, but like in a conversation.
In real time, you're feeling
Yes.
this, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, you know, it's exciting to watch this and think about it. And what you said about the viola lines is so interesting, because this program is filled with gorgeous pieces in which those inner lines constantly are weaving back and forth every single moment, especially the viola songs, which are so extraordinary, but all of these works. And well, before we talk about those, I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about Richard Mühlfeld, the great clarinetist that so inspired Brahms. What was it that he did in those? What do you think his sound was like that was so different that really just made Brahms decide not to retire? That's what I understand.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Very good question. One of the strange moments when I was supposed when we were recording the Brahms Quintet with a great group, Janine Jansen and my friend Thorleif Thedéen, and so we sat and also talked about these things with sound or vibrato or everything around sound. And then I came across an interview which was made by a journalist interviewing a person who knew Joachim, the violin player in the quartet. Yeah. And they were talking about these things, and then suddenly the journalist asked him, what about vibrato, Joachim? Did he use vibrato, and how much, and what? Yeah, he used quite much vibrato. And then suddenly he said, not as much as Mühlfeld, of course. But so let's say the clarinet player used much more vibrato than the strings, basically, which is not the case at all nowadays. Yeah. But having said that, I think that Mühlfeld, he had something really special in the color, because when you look at Brahms, the sonatas and also the trio that we are doing today, it's not like it's super comfortable written for when it comes to the register and so on. He must have had enormous possibility in the shallow more register, in the deeper register, how he treated the instrument, and that's very inspiring to think of, because it's like a voice, really like a voice, and that's what he said also. He really appreciated these sides. But I think it's good to put the question, because sometimes when I record and play Brahms, I use this boxwood clarinet, the older stuff, and you get the timbre color may be closer to what it was, or in your imagination you think you are closer. You never know, but it's good to think of.
And he played with Mühlfeld, didn't he? Brahms, I think he played the quintet and the clarinet trio with Joachim. Yeah. Amazing to think about together.
And they played the sonatas with Joachim on the viola.
But that's not so good. But
we have this big fight about the sonatas, which were first written for the clarinet, for Mühlfeld, and I spent 30 years of my life feeling self-conscious about playing those clarinet pieces arranged for viola, and everybody saying that they were not good, and that even Brahms thought they were not good. And then you know what? I found a letter, beautiful letter, and Brahms is writing to Joachim and asking him, will you be in Frankfurt in November? Because if you are, I will also be there. And if you can bring your viola, and then we can go together to visit Clara Schumann. He says Mrs. Schumann, and we can play my sonatas for her, and it will be beautiful. So I finally found my reason. And just saying that arrangements come from what Martin is talking about is an imagination of sound. What do you do with it? And I think Brahms was inspired by a sound world.
Exactly.
For
More
sure,
than
a color.
Yeah, absolutely. And he transcribed it to violin as well, in the end.
Transcribed to violin too.
It, yeah.
He said that the clarinet cannot be blown more beautifully. Brahms said that about hearing. It cannot be blown. And I think these pieces...
He didn't know Martin Frost.
And I was thinking about Brahms was in love with the viola early on, though, because he wrote those other earlier pieces, like he started, was it the Alto Rhapsody, has gorgeous viola solos, and even German Requiem and some other pieces. But I was curious, they're just such beautiful duet writing. in these two songs that we're going to hear, it's such rich timbres and so on. I'm looking forward to hearing what struck me as a kind of declamatory opening of the Gestilte Sehnsucht. It's so rhetorical. It's such a statement, you know, that it makes. And both of these, and Antoine, I wanted to ask you to talk about your instrument a moment, because it must be fantastic for these songs with the deep register.
Yes, and it could be a better piece to talk about these instruments, like the one that is also here. I think there was, in the 17th century, many different kinds of violas and different sizes of violas. From Stradivari, we know of two, and he names them differently. There is a contralto viola and a tenor viola. And the tenor viola is very big. I wonder if it is not in a collection in a museum. I have to research, because they are very rare, of course. But the tenor viola was very big, almost unplayable in a virtuosic way, so you had to play it in the first position as an accompanying instrument. And then the contralto viola, like the one I play, or this one, much more playable with a virtuosity closer to the one of the violin, and with a brilliance that brought it closer to the violin as well. And so in a quintet, Brahms wrote two incredible quintets with two violas. Also Mozart wrote for this combination. You really have cello and then second viola as a real low voice, could be one of those big violas. First viola as a more brilliant low voice.
Interesting.
And then the second violin, which is a low violin. And we know there was also other kinds of violins that sounded lower, with the strings that went lower as well in the tuning. And so maybe today we have lost this, because we have violin, viola, cello, double bass, and that's it for the strings. But we have to look in our playing for which tessiture, which instrument exactly we are playing. And couldn't be better than these two songs, because it's written for contralto voice. And I cannot describe better my instrument. I think it is definitely, for me, sorry to be so, I know I cannot just talk about only men and women, but for me it is a woman's voice that goes so low, so deep, so rich, so dark, that at one point you are wondering on certain notes, is it man or woman?
Huh.
And I find this an excellent combination of genres, trans-genres, transgender, maybe. And you have the voice. I don't know if you know the singer Nathalie Stutzmann, for example. She's now a great conductor also. But she has a voice. It is every time, and also in rehearsal now with orchestras, she sings a little bit. It is surreal to hear this kind of beautiful, tall woman, and that there is a sort of chest voice that's so warm. And I try to find the same kind of depth with my viola, because I think those instruments were meant as singing instrument. I'm sure the contralto viola, Stradivari thought, I'm going to make a playable instrument that is easier to play than a big viola, but it is made for singing.
And yours is the first Stradivari.
The very first one,
one.
1672.
And its name?
It's named Mahler. I usually don't like this question, because there is only a stupid reason for
Really?
that name. I respect, I admire Gustav Mahler very much, but the viola was bought by the foundation that owns it, the Habis Reutinger Foundation, that lends it to me, in July 1960, and that was the big 100th anniversary of Mahler.
Is that the reason?
So, and that's the only reason. And I always thought maybe Mahler touched it,
Yeah, or something.
but no.
And you said that it has a poplar wood, which might help to make the frequencies very deep. Is
Yes, he
that's
tried to
exciting.
put a poplar wood on the back and yet make it a very flat instrument in the building. I tried today the other instrument, the Medici, which is in the Library of Congress, that has a very curved back. This one is flat, but with a poplar wood, which is extremely soft wood. It's very...
It's just so interesting. Well, as I said, this is a colorful, a moment of color, great color from all three of these artists. You'll be just astounded on this. You said in an interview that I saw, you felt that your instrument suggests colors, or maybe you suggest colors, and he will add some, and that it's so rich in overtones that it forces me to sing everything, that you work together.
Yeah, completely true.
In terms of your instrument, Martin, I'm curious what instrument you play, and do you modify it in any way? I know people really change a lot of things about their instruments.
I have been very faithful to my instrument when I was younger, until maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And then I started to develop, and I also helped the manufacturer in Paris, Buffet-Crampon, to develop new instruments. So I was part of it. And then I got extremely nerdy on these things, which I haven't been before. Yes, I took the instrument and played before, but now, so we have all these different woods. What I said, we have boxwood, we have Mopan is another brown, very beautiful wood. So I changing a lot actually. And now recently I did a Bach recording. Bach never wrote for clarinet, but I was interested to see what it could be, what I could bring out of Bach music. And then I had 4 different clarinets on this recording. For different pieces, I choose different things. If I played with Jorb or lute or cello, I have different, and that's what's and you can really hear it in the recording. It's completely, is like what you have done if you take one violin and then the next one, and then you have to cope with it, and after a while you start to record with it. Very interesting journey for me. So yes, I'm changing a lot now.
Well, maybe to just another question or two about the future of music for all of you. That's a big one, of course, to throw it at people. But Martin, I know you have so many fascinating multimedia projects, and he's created many exciting events with the Swedish Chamber Orchestra. He's a conductor, chief conductor there. You've done this amazing Mozart project and so on. First, I wanted to ask you a question that comes from the Swedish Embassy here. The cultural counselor was excited to hear that you were performing, and he said, I would love to know what he thinks about why the music is so extraordinarily important in Swedish culture, and what the role of education might be. And I know that's something very important for you, music education.
Yeah, well, it's more important now than ever, of course, because we are also cutting down in so many countries. So I don't know how the future will be. I'm sure, the thing that I'm not sure the conversation that I had with you, Shai, but we talked about, we are backing into the future and look back always. We're looking to the big composer, but we actually don't know if the greatest music hasn't been written. I mean, that little we know about the future. And when it comes to education, of course, now for all of us is a little bit of payback time. We are doing masterclass on this trip. We all do masterclasses, and I have my foundation, which I also had some, I wouldn't say crisis in my life, but I have some times in my life when I made important choice, like taking off the chamber orchestra in Swedish Chamber Orchestra as a conductor. Was a big choice because I'm actually a clarinet player. And then I also created this foundation, which we help people mainly with instruments, but also education. We are building a music school in Madagascar. We are helping Kenya with instrument, and mainly wind instrument, but also violins and so on. And I have been playing myself because the problem is always money. So I play some concert and we're collecting money. But that work has been, that was not your question. I'm just talking here. What was your
No,
question?
just, that's useful.
Yeah, okay.
All these are on
Yes.
track. Yeah.
I forgot your question. But no, I really feel that the importance of culture, not only in Sweden, but in every country, and we see also in America, in all of Europe, that they are sort of trying to, what shall they save money when they're all building weapons or whatever they do, you know? That's a big thing. So we are all a little bit scared, but the only thing we can do is being extremely creative and collaborate and making new projects, making new musical landscape, inspire new composers to do, you know, like you said, Mulfeld did for Brahms, because of course Mulfeld inspired Brahms, and nowadays these guys inspire new composers to create new landscapes. So that's what we do.
And all three of you are doing amazing concertos, all sorts of concertos, new ones, Olga Neubert and Philaday, and all these people that you're doing brilliant jobs of bringing these voices to the public. Well, let's see. How about a couple questions? Anybody before they have to go and warm up? Maybe just 2 or 3 questions, if you have them in mind.
Warm
No?
up more now. It's good.
What is life like for you, just living life, when you're not playing concerts?
This week or in general? It's very different. I mean, I think we have about not the same life, of course, but it's a big question. But for me, it's a combination of, I have small kids still, our teenagers, and I see myself doing small changes that I can be home a little bit more, because I like that. So, for example, I bought a chapel, a church, a chapel that I can record in, making concerts, having the kids as a summer place, but also bring a musician to make recordings, which make me, I could be more home. I don't have to go to Berlin to record a new album. I'm at home. So that is a thing that I'm sort of working for the future. Though I love to, especially now when we are together, it's great to have this kind of week. But to be alone on the road for 250 days, that you can also get like, what am I doing? You know, you want this. Yeah.
So, can I ask, the final piece, the Bulgarian Jig, I'm curious about how, well, I think Les Mystères du Roi Bulgare is the one that is sonics that I think people are most familiar with in terms of the Slavic harmonics. But I'm curious in terms of what inspired the Bulgarian Jig and what sort of sonics or harmonics or whatever are in there that.
Well, talk about the kids. My daughter, who plays the cello, she's a really wonderful cellist. Her previous teacher used to give her Bulgarian tunes as not even really exercises, just because it's really great stuff, and rhythmically extremely lively and interesting. And when we were thinking of getting together and putting together a program that would be somehow folk music inspired, I thought we should have a Bulgarian tune and maybe make an arrangement. Let's make an arrangement for one of those Bulgarian tunes, because I just fell in love with them, hearing her practice them. And so then at some point it really reminded me of a very specific Bach Jig from the French suite in G major, and I thought, well, what if we somehow created a piece that would fuse both of them? And because I felt like there was a mysterious connection. Obviously, Bach didn't know. I mean, obviously, you should never say obviously, but he was, I think, only once outside of Prussia or Germany of the time. I think he was in the Karlovy Vary. He was like just across the border once. That's it. So he never really left Germany. So he probably didn't know Bulgarian music. But the fact that there is this sort of kernel of a musical cell that's common for both a Bach Jig, which is by itself a fascinating piece, obviously, and this other completely unrelated folk tune, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And in a way, it's almost like if you take the Bach theme and you just alter this little element in its gene sequence. And so from 12/16, which is the meter of the Bach,
Which is very regular in terms of mathematics. It is divided into 4 times 3.
right. You kind of take almost the same melody, almost, and you turn it into 25/16, which is the Bulgarian rhythmic pattern, which is not uncommon for Bulgarian music. Yeah, and they can dance
Which
to it
cannot
and
be
not
divided
fall.
by 3, I can tell you that much.
Very difficult to divide by 3. And for me, there was something extremely fascinating. It's like what happens to an abstract musical idea that, essentially a very, very simple sort of interval pattern when it's in the hands of Bach and when it's in, a village, near Plovdiv, Bulgaria, Yeah, so this tune happens to be from the area of Plovdiv, and it's quite fascinating to see how music functions. Abstract musical ideas that are always there when Bach takes them on and when they dance to them in Bulgaria. So that's the idea for the piece.
Maybe one more, and we'll give them a chance to have a break before their concert.
Well, I'm Bulgarian, the only real Bulgarian here, so I want, it's very interesting for me, that I want to say. Wanted to have the same question.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you'll recognize it. I don't know.
Maybe we can add one information about the composer Bartók Béla, Hungarian, but who went around and traveled and recorded folk musicians. And I'm concentrating a lot on that right now, and I discovered that because when he puts this in writing in his music, he goes into the square beats, and he tries to fit the folk music into square beats. And sometimes it creates that modern musicians don't see the folk rhythm anymore, because I think, if I may say, he almost wrote for a bit more stupid people, us, the conservatory musicians, and he tried to make it simple for us to understand. But I saw actually a transcription, him, Bartók, taking dictation of the folk musicians and trying to write the real rhythms. And the real rhythms then become very complicated in the more educated writing, and a lot of silences and a lot of subdivision and rhythm like 25/16, or even more complicated than that. And what Shai does incredibly in this piece is that actually it just takes one note, and he proves that from the beginning, and you think, maybe they're not together, just one note the clarinet plays, and then suddenly, but that's a rhythm, that's a feeling, and that's something you can basically only feel with grooving, maybe like a folk musician, and somebody who's not educated could sing it perfectly well. And it took us that time to go back to folk music and listening and playing.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for all.